I stood there frozen, the landline still pressed to my ear as my son's voice cut through the static. "I'm not giving you a damn penny." The kettle hissed behind me, steam clouding the cracked kitchen window, but all I could hear was the click of his hang-up. After 18 years of double shifts, after co-signing every loan and paying every debt, after building his future from scraps of my own, my lottery-winning son had made me a beggar in my own story. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The screen flickered with confetti and oversized checks. Local Channel 7's midday anchor beamed through her mascara and said the words like they were gospel. Tyler Royce of Manchester has just claimed the full $27 million jackpot, lump sum payout. One of the biggest wins in state history. Marilyn stood in her tiny kitchen, the pale light from the cloudy afternoon casting long shadows across her cracked linoleum floor. The kettle behind her hissed softly, forgotten. She didn't smile, didn't gasp, just stared. On screen, Tyler looked different. A crisp navy suit, sunglasses pushed up on his head like a Wall Street clone, his arm draped around a pretty brunette in a glittery beige dress who waved to the cameras like she was royalty. Candace. Marilyn exhaled slowly through her nose and leaned on the counter. "I'll be damned," she murmured, not with bitterness, just a quiet confirmation of something she'd suspected for years. He really did it. The phone buzzed. A group text from her church circle. "That's your boy, right? Wow, Marilyn. Bet you're set for life." Another came seconds later from her neighbor down the block. "Holy cow. Front page tomorrow for sure. When are we celebrating?" Marilyn didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she opened her messages and typed one line to Tyler. "Congratulations. I'm proud of you." She stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before hitting send. Nothing came back. She turned to pour the tea she no longer wanted. Outside, the maple tree in her front yard swayed under the weight of September wind. A single red leaf peeled off and spiraled to the ground. The house was too quiet. Always had been since he moved out. 10 minutes passed. Still no response. She refreshed Instagram. Candace had just posted a boomerang of champagne spraying over the hood of a brand new Bentley, captioned in bold white text, "No more struggle. Just the sweet life now." Marilyn felt the pinch in her chest. Not jealousy, not even anger. Just a deep, cavernous ache that reminded her how many nights she'd skipped dinner so Tyler could eat after practice. How she'd stayed up during graveyard shifts filing forms to keep his student loans in deferral. How she pawned her wedding ring for a semester's rent when he dropped out, just to figure things out. The landline rang, the one she still kept because she never really took to smartphones. She let it ring twice before picking up. "Mom," Tyler's voice said flatly. A flicker of hope rose in her chest. She sat down slowly at the table. "I saw the news," she said gently. "I meant what I texted. I'm proud of you, Silence." Then, "Let's just cut the crap now, all right? I'm not giving you a damn penny." The words dropped like a hammer. No hesitation, no warmth, just cold, clipped finality. "I'm sorry," she said, not out of disbelief, but to give him a chance to walk it back, to hear the venom in his own voice. "You heard me. You're not owed anything. I'm tired of the guilt trips, the past. I earned this. I got lucky, yeah, but I'm not your retirement plan." Marilyn stared at the wall. The photo of the two of them at his high school graduation was still crooked in its dollar store frame. He'd been smiling then, his arms slung around her shoulder. "I never asked for anything," she said quietly. "Well, good. Then we're square," he snapped. A click. Dial tone. She held the receiver in her hand for a beat longer, then slowly placed it back. No tears. Not yet. She stood, walked to the hallway closet and pulled down a worn black file box labeled taxes/old stuff. Inside, yellowed documents, tuition bills, a stack of handwritten IOUs from Tyler in his slanted teenage scrawl. She flipped to the back and slipped in a fresh manila folder, labeled it in ink. The morning came slow and gray, pulling itself over the neighborhood like a wool blanket soaked in rain. Marilyn stood at the sink, staring out the window as the steady drizzle tapped against the glass. Her coffee had gone cold twice, and she'd stopped trying to reheat it. The silence in the house wasn't new, but today, it pressed in around her ribs like a seatbelt pulled too tight. The black file box still sat on the dining table, right where she'd left it the night before. It didn't call to her. It didn't have to. She reached for it with the same quiet resolve she'd used years ago when her paychecks came up short, and the electricity bills didn't. Inside the box, the contents had begun to separate themselves naturally, years forming their own sections, memories filed not just by date, but by weight. She pulled out the folders one by one, unfolding her own history of sacrifice in Xerox and ink. There were the student loan agreements with her signature carefully penned on the bottom line, her hand slightly shaking from exhaustion back then, though she'd hidden it well. Tyler's name, printed in confident block letters, sat above hers. One loan turned into 3. Then came the forbearance forms she filed during that winter when he lost his campus job. She'd filled them out at 2 a.m. between shifts at the nursing home. Next came the contract for the apartment he moved into during what he called his restart year after dropping out. Marilyn had co-signed without hesitation. She remembered the way he smiled at her afterward, said, "You always believe in me, Mom," and kissed her on the cheek like a child again. That lease had ended in eviction. She paid the debt in installments, never told him how long it took her to crawl out from under it. Beneath that stack, she found a folded note on lined paper. Tyler had written it sometime during his junior year of high school, after she lent him $600 to cover car repairs. "I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Love you forever." The forever was underlined twice, the way teenagers do when they still mean it. She read it twice before placing it on top of the growing pile. Another envelope held receipts from a rent-to-own laptop she'd gotten in his senior year. He needed it for college prep, he said. She remembered skipping new shoes that winter and tightening her grocery budget to make the payment. Every page she pulled out had a cost, not just financial, but spiritual. Each one chipped away at the version of herself that had once believed motherhood was always rewarded with loyalty. Her phone buzzed on the table. Another notification. Candace had posted again. This time, it was a photo of Tyler leaning against a charcoal Bentley, one hand on the hood, the other around her waist. Her dress shimmered in the camera flash. The caption read, "Can't fake this kind of life. Manifested, earned, deserved." Marilyn studied the image for a long moment, then set the phone down, face first, as though the screen might burn through her skin if she looked too long. A soft knock at the back door pulled her from her trance. Nancy stepped in without waiting for an answer, her raincoat dripping at the hem and a steaming coffee in each hand. She glanced at the table at the spread of documents like old battlefield reports. "He forgot who fed him when his dad didn't," Nancy said, her voice low but firm, like the slam of a judge's gavel. Marilyn didn't respond right away. She reached for the manila folder she'd started the night before and carefully inserted each document, each note, each receipt into it. Her hands moved with precision. No tremble now, no uncertainty. "I didn't save this to hurt him," she said finally. "I saved it because I couldn't afford to forget." Nancy nodded, her eyes shining. "You didn't forget. He did." When the last paper was tucked neatly inside, Marilyn picked up a black felt-tip pen and rewrote the label, pressing hard enough that the ink bled slightly through the folder. The demand letter went out on a Tuesday, crisp and formal, printed on thick ivory stock that smelled faintly of fresh toner and final chances. Jordan Lake had drafted every word with the kind of precision that left no room for misinterpretation. The amount was clear, $123,000, plus interest calculated over 15 years. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. Marilyn had signed off on it without hesitation. She didn't ask how long it would take, or what the odds were, or whether they'd win. She simply nodded, slid the signed letter back across Jordan's mahogany desk, and said, "Make sure it gets to him directly." It did. Less than 48 hours later, Tyler received the envelope by courier while stepping out of a high-end cigar lounge in New Haven. A photographer captured the moment, not the contents, of course, but his reaction. A smirk, a dismissive shake of his head, and the way he crumpled the envelope in one hand like it was a fast food receipt. He didn't respond through a lawyer. Instead, he went live on Instagram. "Let me make this real simple," he said to the camera, sitting poolside in mirrored sunglasses, his shirt unbuttoned to the navel. "I didn't come up just to get dragged down by guilt and manipulation. I cut people off for a reason, Ain't nobody owed anything, especially not someone who made my life hell growing up. The video lasted 97 seconds, long enough for Candace to chime in with a fake pout and say, "It's always the ones who do the least that expect the most." By evening, the clip had over 82,000 views. Marilyn didn't watch it. She didn't have to. Nancy read her the transcript over tea the next morning. Marilyn stirred her spoon in slow, tight circles and didn't look up once. "Let him talk," she said quietly. "The courtroom has better acoustics." Across town, Jordan spent the day filing preliminary motion. He'd already reviewed every document Marilyn gave him: leases, loan notes, tuition records, even the crumpled napkin Tyler once scribbled a promise on during his second failed attempt at community college. But the real weapon came from a sealed envelope Marilyn hadn't opened in nearly a decade. It was an agreement. Short, handwritten, notarized. Tyler had been 24 at the time, fresh out of his second stint trying to make it in LA. Broke, bitter, but not yet cruel. He needed a place to stay, and Marilyn had let him move back in under one condition: that if he ever came into significant money, through any windfall, settlement, or lottery, he would share 30% of it with her. He signed the agreement without hesitation, dated it, initialed each clause. The notary had been a retired nurse Marilyn knew through Nancy. Jordan read the agreement twice, then once more, just to be sure. "Miss Royce," he said, his voice calm but alert, "this changes everything." Tyler had no idea it even existed. That ignorance didn't stop him from doubling down online. "She's jealous," he tweeted 3 days later. "That's all this is. Jealous of my success, my girl, my freedom. My mom was never proud, only possessive, and I'm done with it." The post got traction. Some of his followers applauded him for setting boundaries, but the tide had started to shift. A few local journalists began asking questions. Who was Marilyn Royce? Why hadn't she made a statement? What kind of mother sues her son unless something real happened? Candace, in her usual fashion, tried to steer the story back in their favor. She posted screenshots, heavily redacted, suspiciously cropped, of messages between Tyler and Marilyn that implied manipulation, emotional blackmail, guilt trips. But within hours, users flagged inconsistencies. Timestamps didn't line up, fonts were off, metadata told a different story. Meanwhile, Jordan filed a formal response to Tyler's public denials. Included in the filing was the notarized agreement. The court date was requested. A judge was assigned. The headline hit the front page before Marilyn even knew a reporter had called. $27 million lottery winner sued by his own mother, family ties shredded over old debts. It sat just beneath a photo of Tyler in his tailored suit, squinting against the sun as he exited the lottery office 2 weeks earlier. The camera had caught him mid-step, mid-smirk, mid-delusion. By breakfast, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Neighbors, former co-workers, church friends, even distant cousins who hadn't called since the funeral 3 years ago. Everyone had something to say. Half offered condolences, the rest offered opinions, and a few, like vultures, offered to help her tell her side for the right platform. Marilyn silenced her phone and let the calls stack like unread bills. Across town, Jordan was already 10 moves ahead. He'd scheduled a single, tight-lipped statement through a local legal blog. "Our client is not interested in fighting through the media. We trust the courts to handle this." That was all. No interviews, no appearances, no retaliation, but silence, in a scandal, speaks louder than outrage. The effect was immediate. While Tyler shouted from his Instagram stories and Candace uploaded Q&A videos claiming toxic family drama, the calm restraint from Marilyn's side stirred a different kind of interest. People began asking why she hadn't spoken. What did she know that she wasn't saying? Tyler's voice, once cocky and untouchable, started to curdle in the public ear. His bravado felt manufactured now, stretched too thin under the heat of scrutiny. Worse, his new, luxury wellness brand, an energy drink venture he'd been launching quietly behind the scenes, began to unravel. One investor pulled out after the article hit. Another demanded a pause on promotional content until "this family matter is resolved privately." Candace didn't take the setback well. 2 days after the story broke, she hired a publicist. By the end of the week, gossip sites were flooded with phrases like bitter, estranged mother, opportunistic legal attack, and greedy parent unable to let go. They even planted a photo from Tyler's childhood, the one where Marilyn looked tired, face lined, shoulders slumped, next to a recent shot of her in court-ready attire. The implication was clear. She had always been difficult. But the internet was watching closely now, and Jordan had just begun to play his hand. He'd found a letter. It was from Tyler, dated 10 years ago, written in longhand on ruled notebook paper and signed with the kind of sincerity people don't fake when they think no one will ever read it again. You always believed in me, even when I didn't. When I make it, I swear I'll take care of you. I'll pay you back for everything, and more. That's a promise, Mom. Tyler, age 19. The ink had faded at the corners, but the words held their shape. Jordan didn't release it to a reporter. He submitted it as part of the legal filing and let the court docket do the work. By morning, the public copy had circulated online. Reddit threads lit up. Twitter, or what remained of it, turned. Subreddits titled r/family law sucks and r/parenting nightmare filled with long comment chains dissecting the letter, the contract, and the video clips side by side. Some posts quoted Jordan's phrasing directly. This isn't about bitterness. It's about a legal promise, a financial obligation made and broken. Tyler tried to fight back. He posted a video in front of a luxury SUV with the caption, "They'll never take me down. I built this life." But for the first time, the comments weren't on his side. You didn't build anything. You just bought the bricks. You don't write letters like that unless someone really was there for you. Pay your mother. Candace didn't help. She posted a TikTok where she pretended to cry while mouthing the words to a sad pop song, captioned, "When you're just trying to live your rich life and drama finds you." The backlash was swift. Even her own followers started to peel away. The light in Jordan's office always seemed to hit differently in the late afternoon, angled and quiet, filtering through half-open blinds like it was trying not to disturb anything. Marilyn sat across from him in a high-backed leather chair, her purse resting on her lap like a vault. She reached inside and pulled out a small, dust-worn lockbox, no bigger than a jewelry case, but heavier than it looked. She set it down gently on the table between them, then took a moment. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. She had passed the stage of trembling. Now there was only clarity. "It's been in my closet for almost 10 years, she said. "I never thought I'd need to open it again." Jordan leaned forward slightly, but didn't touch the box. He waited for her to do it. The latch clicked open with a muted metallic snap, and she lifted the lid. Inside, on top of a folded newspaper clipping from a job she'd once held and a faded birthday card from someone long gone, was a single white envelope marked in thick blue ink. Legal, Tyler, age 24, Marilyn. Unfolded the contents slowly, laying the pages out like a map. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting was strong, deliberate even. And at the bottom, in unmistakable pen strokes, Tyler Royce, dated, initialed, witness. The agreement was short, just under a page, but it was ironclad. In the event that I, Tyler Royce, receive any major financial winnings, settlements, or awards, be it from lottery, lawsuit, or business transaction, I agree to allocate 30% of the total sum to my mother, Marilyn Royce, in recognition of her years of financial and emotional support. Signed, Tyler Royce. Dated, October 11th, 2016. Witness, Nancy Templeton. Notary, Judith M. Lane. License number 713245. Jordan read it twice, then again. His face gave nothing away, but the air in the room shifted, slower, heavier, like something just clicked into place. "This is enforceable," he said, placing the paper down gently, "especially with the notary and witness signatures. There's no ambiguity." Marilyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I remember that night," she said softly. He was desperate. He'd just come back from California, said he needed a place to stay for a few months, get back on his feet. I told him I'd help him, but only if he promised to pay me back someday. I made it formal because I knew, deep down, I knew this might happen. Jordan gave a single nod. "You were right to protect yourself." By the end of that same day, he had updated the lawsuit. It was no longer just about informal debt, or unpaid loans, or vague obligations. Now it included breach of written contract. The tone had changed. This wasn't emotional leverage. It was legal ammunition. Nancy, when asked, didn't hesitate. I remember signing it, she told Jordan later that week, sitting in the same office Marilyn had been in days before. He was wearing that old hoodie from Santa Monica, the one he always pulled over his face when he lied. But that night, he didn't lie. He meant it. He just didn't think he'd ever have to follow through. Meanwhile, Candace caught wind of the update and went into damage control mode. She took to Instagram again, this time sitting on a high balcony overlooking some rented luxury suite, glass of wine in hand. "This is clearly fake," she said to her followers. "People will do anything when they see a number like 27 million. That's not a contract. That's a trap. And we're not falling for it." She followed the post with screenshots from a private group chat. Out of context, heavily cropped, trying to imply that Marilyn had been planning this for years. But it backfired. Commenters quickly pointed out discrepancies. The date stamps didn't match. The usernames in the chat were edited. One even belonged to someone who'd died 2 years prior. And then came the moment that made her spiral. A retired notary, Judith Lane, appeared in a brief interview with a local legal podcast. She sat upright, professional, voice steady. "Yes," she said plainly, "that's my signature. I notarized that document in 2016. Tyler Royce was present. He showed ID. He signed willingly. There was no coercion." The clip went viral within hours. The letter arrived by courier. No knock. Just a dull thud against the screen door. The envelope slid between the frame and the morning quiet. Marilyn saw it from the kitchen window and didn't move at first. The kettle was boiling, the scent of Earl Grey curling into the corners of her small home, but her eyes had already fixed on the gold foil seal. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. But she did anyway. The language was polished, clinical, a few paragraphs dressed in legal pleasantries before cutting to the point. A one-time offer of $50,000 in exchange for full withdrawal of all claims, past, present, and future. No admission of guilt. No acknowledgement of debt. Just a number. Jordan's voice was even when he read it over the phone. "This isn't an offer," he said flatly. "It's an insult dressed as paperwork." Marilyn didn't argue. She folded the letter in half, then again, until it disappeared inside the manila folder labeled correspondent. Her hands were steady. "Decline it," she said, formally. No counter. He didn't need to ask if she was sure. She'd been sure for weeks. Across town, behind rented security gates and influencer-curated lighting, Tyler was unraveling in the most expensive way possible. The headlines hadn't softened. If anything, they'd sharpened, shifting from curiosity to critique. The man who once bragged about cutting off the dead weight now found himself explaining why a mother with signed contracts and notarized proof had misunderstood their relationship. Candace, sensing the tide, had started putting distance between herself and the mess. It began subtly. Fewer joint appearances. A solo brand collaboration here. A red carpet post without Tyler's name in the caption there. But Marilyn had an eye for these things. She knew how women maneuver when they feel the ice cracking beneath them. Then came the text, leaked by a friend of a friend to a gossip blog. Candace venting privately, calling Tyler chaotic, entitled, on his way to ruining everything. The screenshots hit the internet before lunch. Marilyn didn't celebrate. She screenshotted them, time-stamped them, printed them, and filed them behind a new tab in her growing archive. Later that week, a voicemail came. Tyler's voice, slurred, angry, maybe drunk. "You think this makes you noble? Dragging me through court? You want to win? Fine. Take your precious percentage. But don't act like you were some saint. You loved making me feel like I owed you. I don't owe you anything." She saved that too. Created a folder on her desktop. Voicemails. Legal. Then she sat down at her desk and began drafting a public statement. Not to post immediately, just to have. Just in case. Jordan, meanwhile, was sharpening his strategy. He filed a formal discovery request for Tyler's financials, full transaction history, tax filings, lottery disbursement logs, the kind of records that left no room for storytelling. 2 days later, the data arrived in encrypted format, and Jordan stayed late to review them alone. Marilyn didn't hear from him that night, which wasn't unusual. He preferred silence when working through something heavy. The call came the next morning, early, before 8 a.m. "Marilyn," he said, voice tight, clipped, There's a transfer we need to talk about. She put down her coffee. Not to Candace? No. To someone else. $500,000. Wired the week after he won. Her pulse didn't spike, but her breath did change. Who? She asked. I'm still digging, Jordan said. But it wasn't a business expense. It wasn't a loan payoff. And it sure as hell wasn't disclosed in any of his public statements. He paused. This woman's name doesn't appear in anything tied to Candace, not even in social media, but she has an account in Colorado, and she's been receiving money for a while. Marilyn leaned back in her chair, the pieces falling silently into place. Not everything added up yet, but something about that state, that timeline, pulled at her memory like a sore tooth. The name Jordan gave her, Samantha Lee, meant nothing to Marilyn at first, but the moment he said Colorado Springs, something inside her stirred. Not a sharp memory, not even a full image, just a tone, a cadence. Tyler had passed through that city during one of his growth phases, post-LA, pre-Candace, a job he never kept, a woman he never mentioned twice. Marilyn sat at her desk and began pulling threads. Online records were easier now than they'd ever been. One reverse lookup and 2 public filings later, she found a county court docket. Samantha Lee v. Tyler Royce, a child custody case, filed 6 years ago. No resolution on record, no judgment, just a motion, then a silence. Jordan followed up the next day. I reached her, he said. She was hesitant at first, but when I explained the situation, she asked if she could call me back after work. She's a receptionist at a dental office in downtown Colorado Springs. Single mom. Said she didn't want anything to do with drama but wouldn't lie to protect someone who abandoned them. Marilyn closed her eyes and exhaled through her nose. Is there a child? Yes, Jordan said. A boy. 8 years old. She sent me photos of the bank deposits from Tyler's transfer. $500,000 wired in chunks over the course of 2 months. All post-lottery. Marilyn didn't speak for a while. She looked out the window where a pair of squirrels chased each other across her fading garden bed. The wind had picked up again. September shedding leaves faster than the branches could keep track. He never told me, she said finally. Not once. You want to use this in court? Jordan asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her instinct screamed yes, not out of vengeance, but out of truth. What kind of man wired hush money to the mother of his child after ignoring them for nearly a decade, and then had the audacity to paint himself as the victim? But something inside her resisted the temptation. Not yet, she said, but keep it safe. Candace, however, was not nearly as restrained. How she found out about the wire transfer remained a mystery. Maybe she checked the wrong email. Maybe she snooped on Tyler's laptop. Or maybe one of her influencer assistants finally decided they'd had enough of fetching iced oat milk lattes and holding ring lights. Either way, the fallout was volcanic. Marilyn wasn't there to witness it, but the internet was. The scene unfolded on a live stream. Candace pacing back and forth in what looked like a penthouse kitchen, her makeup half done, still wearing a robe. Tyler was off camera, but his voice echoed faintly in the background. You have a kid, she shrieked. You wired $500,000 to some random woman in Colorado and didn't tell me? That's why you've been panicking about bank statements? Are you insane? Tyler tried to interrupt, but she talked over him, louder this. You told me this court thing was your mother trying to extort you, but you have a whole-ass child and you never paid a dime until the lottery hit? The feed cut abruptly, but not before 6,000 people screen-recorded it. By the next morning, clips had circulated across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Threads popped up with titles like Plot Twist, Tyler Royce is worse than we thought, and Candace goes nuclear, caught in 4K. Marilyn sat quietly in her living room, TV off, phone face down. She didn't smile, didn't flinch, just sipped her tea and slid Samantha Lee's printed bank statements into a file labeled Unused Leverage. The days leading up to court passed with the rhythm of an old clock, steady, relentless, impossible to stop. Marilyn marked each morning not with anticipation but with intention. Her steps grew slower, more precise. Everything she touched felt like it carried weight, like it might end up in someone's testimony. The air in the house had changed. No music played from the kitchen radio, no background noise from the news. Even Nancy, when she stopped by to drop off pie or strong coffee, didn't stay long. It wasn't silence out of sadness, it was reverence. as though the whole house had agreed to hold its breath with her. Jordan had warned her that the lead up to trial was the hardest part. "The waiting sharpens everything," he'd said. "You'll hear your own doubts louder than anyone else's." But Marilyn didn't feel doubt. She felt distance from the past, from the noise, from her son. She sat at her desk for hours at a time, reviewing her own record, not because Jordan had asked her to, but because she needed to feel every decision she'd made along the way. Every deposit slip, every signed loan, every IOU that Tyler had left behind like a gum wrapper. The file folders no longer intimidated her. They read like chapters now, not confessions. Outside her house, a few reporters lingered. Nothing aggressive, not yet. A local journalist had parked across the street in a weathered Corolla, camera hidden beneath a jacket in the front seat. Marilyn closed the blinds but left the porch light on each night anyway. Let them wonder. On Thursday morning, Jordan called with an update. Tyler's lawyer filed a motion for delay, he said, citing mental strain and media bias. Marilyn paused, glanced at her notes, and closed the folder in front of her. "He's scared," she said. "He should be." The hearing to consider the motion took place over Zoom. Judge Elgin Parks, appointed to the case just days earlier, didn't bother hiding his skepticism. "I don't delay trials because a party made themselves look foolish in public," he said dryly, looking down over his glasses. "Court is still scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. sharp." That was that. With the date locked in, Jordan doubled down. He brought Marilyn into his office and walked her through trial prep like a boxing coach laying out the final plan before a title fight. "This isn't about being emotional," he reminded her. "The court doesn't care how angry you are. They care what you know, what you saw, and what you can prove. Let them see you as steady, not soft, not hard, just unshakable." Marilyn didn't take notes. She didn't have to. Nancy insisted on joining them halfway through the session. "I want them to hear it from me," she said, arms crossed. "I signed that agreement. I saw what he did. And I'm not letting that boy rewrite history because he bought himself a new pair of shoes." Jordan raised an eyebrow at Marilyn. "You okay with her on the stand?" Marilyn gave a faint smile. "She's the only person I trust to speak for me." By the weekend, the media buzz had grown louder. Speculation, commentators, TikTok lawyers analyzing court documents with red circles and dramatic piano music. But Marilyn didn't open the apps. She ironed her blouse, polished her flats, packed her bag. Then, on Sunday night, she opened the drawer where she kept his things, the small collection that hadn't been pawned or boxed away over the years. From inside, she pulled out her late husband's old wristwatch. The band was leather, worn soft with time. The face was cracked near the top, but it still ticked. She slid it onto her wrist. It was a quiet kind of armor. Marilyn had never stepped foot inside a courtroom before. Not like this. She'd once fought a parking ticket in municipal court, years ago, sitting quietly in a bench row behind a teenage boy who reeked of Axe body spray and panic. But this was different. The hallways were colder, the walls taller. The air pressed down like a lid on a slow-boiling pot. At precisely 8:59 a.m., Jordan nudged her gently and said, "Ready?" She gave a single nod. They stepped through the double doors into courtroom 3C. The room was sparse. Sterile wood, polished floors, no drama, except for the tension hanging between the benches. Tyler was already seated at the defendant's table, flanked by two attorneys. He wore a gray suit a size too expensive, jaw tight, eyes low. He didn't look up when Marilyn entered, didn't acknowledge her at all. Judge Elgin Parks entered 5 minutes later, black robe flowing like thunderclouds, glasses balanced halfway down the bridge of his nose. His reputation had preceded him, blunt, precise, allergic to performance. "Let's proceed," he said without preamble. Opening statements? Jordan stood and buttoned his jacket. When he walked, it was without rush, his confidence not performative, just earned. He began not with legal jargon, but with story. "My client, Marilyn Royce, raised her only child alone. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. She skipped meals to keep the lights on. She co-signed loans, paid rent, covered tuition. And when her son failed to finish school, she didn't punish him. She welcomed him back with the same love that raised him." He paused, letting the silence work for him. "And then, he won the lottery." Another pause. "Instead of sharing that joy, He cut her off, publicly, cruelly. And in doing so, he ignored not just the past, but a legally binding contract he signed at age 24. Today, we're not here to litigate their relationship. We're here to enforce a promise made in writing, with a witness, with a notary, and with intent. Tyler's lawyer, a sleek man named Curtis Dunning, rose with practiced boredom. This is not a financial case, he said. This is an emotional shakedown. A son grows up poor, gets rich, the mother sues him. The tabloids love it. But courts don't exist to resolve feelings. They exist to enforce law. This is weaponized guilt. Nothing more. Judge Parks scribbled something in his notes. Unreadable. Jordan didn't flinch. Instead, he began walking the court through the first document: bank records, loan statements, co-signed contracts, Tyler's handwritten IOUs. Then came the notarized agreement, enlarged and projected onto the screen. In his own words, Jordan said, 30% of any major financial award. Signed, dated, and witnessed. The courtroom was silent. Then the notary, Judith Lane, took the stand. She looked exactly how Marilyn remembered her. Precise, no nonsense, straight-backed even in a worn blazer. Her voice didn't waver. Yes, I notarized the agreement, she said. I confirmed Tyler Royce's ID. He read the document. He signed it in my presence. There was no coercion, no pressure. Just understanding. Curtis tried to discredit her with mild sarcasm, asked how often she remembered faces from years ago. I don't remember every face, Judith replied, but I remember arrogance, and I remember young men who think they're smarter than paperwork. A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery. Judge Parks didn't stop it. Next came Nancy. She walked to the stand without drama, wore no makeup, didn't look at Tyler once. He needed a place to stay, she said. She let him move back in, and she told him, if you ever make it, I'm not asking for thanks. I'm asking you to keep your word. Curtis objected to emotional testimony, but the judge allowed it. Let her finish, Judge Parks said. And then, after Nancy stepped down, something shifted. Judge Parks adjusted his glasses and looked down at a sheet of paper. This isn't in evidence, he murmured, but I remember this name. Royce. He flipped through a folder. 2 years ago, a civil suit in Hartford. A woman alleged that Mr. Royce solicited a business loan under false pretenses and disappeared. Case dismissed due to lack of documentation. Curtis straightened in his chair. That has no bearing on. I didn't say it was admissible, Parks said. I said I remembered it. His eyes lingered on Tyler for a long moment. He walked into the courtroom 15 minutes late, not enough to cause a sanction, but enough to make people notice. His tie was crooked, his eyes rimmed red. Curtis didn't even bother to look up from his legal pad as Tyler sank into the chair beside him, jaw clenched, knuckles white against the polished wood. The courtroom was already full. Same reporters, same quiet anticipation. Only today, something felt different, like the balance had tilted and everyone could feel it in their teeth. Marilyn sat upright at the plaintiff's table. No emotion, no gloating, just stillness. Her late husband's watch peeked from under the cuff of her blouse, ticking softly, marking time not as punishment, but as proof. She had waited, and now she had arrived. Jordan leaned over and whispered something too low for anyone else to hear. Marilyn gave a single nod. Judge Parks entered, robe rustling like wind through dry leaves. He gave a glance toward Tyler's side, brief, but sharp. Counselor, he said to Curtis, I suggest your client begins showing this court the respect it's due. That includes punctuality and preparedness. Curtis gave a rehearsed half-apology, but the damage had been done. Jordan stood and approached the bench. Your Honor, we'd like to request a midday addition to the witness list. We understand it's unconventional, but the individual has come forward with timely and relevant financial disclosures regarding Mr. Royce. Judge Parks raised a brow. Is the witness already present? She is, Jordan confirmed. The door at the back of the courtroom opened quietly. Samantha Lee stepped inside, clutching a manila envelope to her chest like it held her name. She wore jeans and a blazer too large for her frame, hair pulled into a plain ponytail. Nothing about her said influencer or spectacle. Everything about her said truth. Tyler turned to Curtis with wide eyes and whispered something frantic. Curtis's mouth barely moved, but the answer was clear. No one told me either. Candace sat in the front row of the gallery, legs crossed, face like stone. She hadn't sat beside Tyler all morning, hadn't touched him, hadn't spoken, and when Samantha passed her on the way to the stand, she didn't blink. Jordan called no attention to the drama. Instead, he guided Samantha through her testimony with surgical calm. She explained how she knew Tyler, when they dated, how he left, how he reappeared only after the lottery win, wiring money in silence. She produced bank statement, printed emails, a photo of their son, taken on his 8th birthday. The same week Tyler told the world he owed no one anything. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She just told the truth. Curtis objected twice. Judge Parks overruled both with a wave of his pen. When Samantha stepped down, the jury shifted visibly. One woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Another leaned forward, her arms folded tightly against her chest. The men didn't move, but they looked. Marilyn never turned her head. She stared straight ahead, expression unreadable, but the lines around her mouth had deepened, not with satisfaction, but with history. Pain, recognized pain. When the court broke for recess, Tyler bolted for the hallway. Curtis followed, snapping in hushed tones. Candace remained seated, scrolling her phone like nothing existed beyond the screen. Nancy leaned toward Marilyn. "He's crumbling," she whispered. "I know," Marilyn said softly. Judge Parks returned after break with a firmer tone. "This court expects cooperation from both parties," he said. "That includes arriving on time, managing emotional outbursts, and respecting the rules of evidence. Mr. Royce's team is advised to prepare their client accordingly." Then he tapped the gavel once. Firm, final. The second day of testimony ended with a kind of fragile stillness that never fully settled. The jury had seen enough to begin forming their own judgment, and the court spectators, bloggers, reporters, podcasters lurking in the back row, had already turned today's quotes into tomorrow's headlines. As the room emptied for recess, Curtis approached Jordan with a folder tucked tight beneath his arm, face unreadable. "Let's talk," he said. Jordan didn't flinch. He nodded once, then leaned toward Marilyn. "They're coming with a number," he said quietly. "I can feel it." Marilyn didn't ask what kind. She simply tucked her papers into her leather case and followed them out of the courtroom. The private conference room was cold. Not physically. It was temperature-controlled, neatly furnished, but the energy was clinical, tense. Curtis took one side of the polished oak table. Jordan and Marilyn sat across. Tyler stood behind them, pacing like a man in a cage of his own design. Curtis slid the folder across the table. "500,000, he said. "Flat settlement. In exchange for full dismissal of all claims, with a mutual non-disparagement clause, and no admission of wrongdoing." Jordan opened the folder slowly, more for effect than for review. He already knew the move, a figure meant to sound generous to the public but still miles beneath what Marilyn was owed, what she was promised. He closed it again and looked up. "Declined," Jordan said. Curtis blinked. "No counter?" "Oh, there's a counter," Jordan said, folding his hand. 30% of $27 million, as outlined in a signed, witnessed, notarized contract, plus damages for defamation and emotional distress, primarily driven by the defendant's own public statements, some of which are still online. Curtis sighed and leaned back in his chair, turning briefly toward Tyler, who was already pacing again. His hands were moving, agitated, panicked, cornered. "This is absurd," Tyler muttered. "She doesn't need all that. This is revenge." Plain and simple. Jordan didn't look at him. He kept his gaze fixed on Curtis. "If that's how your client wants to characterize it, we'll be happy to see what the jury thinks." Judge Parks knocked twice before opening the conference door himself. "You've got 15 minutes, he said. "And then, we're resuming. If there's anything productive to come from this, now's the time." He left without waiting for acknowledgement. Curtis exhaled heavily and stepped out to make a call. For a few moments the room was quiet again. Then Tyler spoke. His voice didn't rise. It didn't bark or sneer the way it had on live streams or Instagram rants. It cracked. "Why are you doing this to me?" Marilyn turned slowly in her. She didn't speak for a long beat. When she did, her voice was low, clear. "I'm not doing anything to you. You're dragging me in front of the world. You're taking everything. I'm asking for what you promised," she said. "Nothing more. Not because I need it, because I earned it. And because you spat on everything I gave you the second you thought you were above consequence." Tyler's jaw clenched. His shoulders dropped. "You could have just talked to me." "I did," she said softly. You told me I'd never see a penny. He turned away, pacing again, faster now, like he could outwalk his own shame. Marilyn stood up, adjusted the watch on her wrist, looked him in the eye. You left me no choice. Candace took the stand wearing white. White blazer, white blouse, white nails. No jewelry except for a single diamond pendant that gleamed with a carefully positioned spotlight above the witness box. Her expression was flat, performative, like she'd been told to keep it neutral, but didn't know how to fake humble. She crossed her legs, adjusted her seat, gave a delicate blink as she placed her hand on the Bible. Jordan didn't look at her right away. He took a sip of water, adjusted his notes, then finally rose and approached the stand with the kind of deliberate calm that made even confident people nervous. Miss Roy, he began, using the surname she preferred online. You're aware that your social media presence has played a significant role in public perception of this case. She tilted her head slightly. I suppose? I'm an influencer. People follow me. Yes, Jordan said. Over 600,000 on Instagram, 180,000 on TikTok, and several sponsored brand deals, all of which coincided with the defendant's lottery win. A smile flickered on her lips. Is that a question? Jordan smiled back. It is now. Did you, at any point, create or distribute digitally altered content to discredit or humiliate Marilyn Royce during this lawsuit? Her eyes narrowed. No. Jordan clicked his remote. The court's monitor lit up with side-by-side screenshots, Instagram captions, DMSA Facebook group with doctored timestamps, some implying Marilyn had threatened her son, messages that digital forensic analysts had already debunked as fakes. Are these your accounts? Jordan asked. I mean, some of them are, she said, a note of defiance creeping into her voice. But I didn't make any of those. He clicked again. A series of IP logs, metadata records, location. The court's tech consultant, seated quietly in the second row, nodded toward Judge Parks, confirming they were all verified. Jordan stepped closer. These posts were created from your devices, using your Wi-Fi, and in some cases, your verified accounts, sometimes within minutes of your sponsored content uploads. Would you still like to claim they were fabricated by someone else? Candace opened her mouth, then closed it again. A soft murmur spread through the gallery. Judge Parks tapped his gavel once. Order. Continue. Mr. Lake Jordan nodded. I'd also like to enter into evidence this audio clip, recovered from a voice memo backup file. He pressed play. Candace's voice, clear as crystal, tinged with amusement, filtered through the room. No one's gonna cry for some broke lady in a cardigan. All she has is a sad face and paperwork. We've got lawyers and followers. We control the frame. Silence. Candace blinked once, twice. That was taken out of context. Judge Parks raised a hand. I'd advise you to stop speaking unless asked a direct question. Perjury, he added dryly, is not a game. Curtis sank lower in his chair, one hand over his mouth. Tyler didn't even look up. Marilyn sat still, unmoving. She didn't gloat, didn't nod. She just watched, as if this wasn't victory, just clarity finally arriving in real time. Jordan approached the bench and requested that Candace's devices be subpoenaed for further forensic review. Judge Parks granted the motion. Then, as Candace stepped down, no longer composed, the white outfit now working against her, like bleach poured over blood, Jordan paused and spoke again. One more item for the record, Your Honor. He handed the clerk a document sealed in a plain beige folder. An anonymous submission received by our office during recess. It's been reviewed by legal counsel and traced to a registered bank account in the Cayman Islands, opened in Candace Roy's name. The courtroom rippled again. Tyler's head finally snapped up. We believe, Jordan continued, that this account was used to shelter funds diverted from the initial lottery payment, including, but not limited to, unreported assets. Judge Parks adjusted his glasses. Are you informing the court of pending financial misconduct? We've already forwarded the materials to the IRS, Your Honor. By the time the closing arguments began, the courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like a held breath. No whispers, no scribbling reporters, just stillness and the electric weight of what had been said and what couldn't be unsaid. Jordan rose from his seat with the quiet assurance of someone who knew the room was listening before he spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He just stepped forward, adjusted his tie, and looked directly at the jury. This case isn't about a lottery ticket. It's not about hurt feelings or broken relationships. It's about a promise. He held up a copy of the notarized contract, its edges worn now from days of evidence handling. My client didn't demand this. She didn't create it. She didn't threaten or coerce. Her son wrote it, signed it, initialed every line. And then, when life finally handed him the break she'd prayed he'd one day get, he tore it up behind closed doors and called it growth. He paused. And still, she came to court not to ruin him, but to hold him accountable. To say, I gave you everything. The least you owe me is your word. He turned slightly, his voice softening. Dignity, he said. That's what she came here with. And what she deserves to leave with. He stepped back. No flourish. No bow. Curtis stood next. He made a valiant effort, flipped through paperwork, tossed around terms like undue influence and family discord, even referred to the contract as a relic of emotional desperation. But the words landed hollow now, like echoes from a house already cleared out. When he tried once more to discredit the notary's credibility, even Judge Parks lowered his pen and looked over his glasses. We've heard the testimony, counselor, he said. Move on. Curtis did, but not with grace. As the attorneys sat down, the judge gave his instruction. Then the jury filed out, and the room deflated, not with relief, but with gravity, the kind that settles deep in the bone. Tyler didn't look at Marilyn. She didn't expect him to. She sat still, hands folded in her lap, eyes soft, not triumphant, not bitter, just full of a sorrow so quiet it almost looked like peace. They waited. 2 hours passed, then 4. When the jury returned just after sunset, the room reassembled in silence. No one spoke. Even the judge took his seat slower than usual. The forewoman stood. In the matter of Royce versus Royce, she said, voice steady, we find in favor of the plaintiff. She unfolded the second sheet. We award 30% of the defendant's lottery winnings, as per the contract, and an additional $200,000 in damages related to defamation. There was no gasp, no cry. Just the sound of a single pen tapping against the wood of the bench as Judge Parks nodded. Judgment is entered. Court is adjourned. His gavel struck once, then the courtroom exploded. Not with noise, but with movement. Reporters darted for their phones. Curtis slumped into his seat. Tyler remained frozen, blinking like he hadn't heard the words right. Marilyn stood slowly. She didn't look toward the gallery. She didn't scan the room for reaction. Instead, she looked at her son. Not with anger, not even disappointment, just a long, searching look, like she was trying to find the boy she once packed lunches for and read stories to, underneath the expensive suit and shaking hand. Tyler met her gaze for a split second, but he couldn't hold it. He turned and walked out the side door before anyone could stop him. Nancy appeared at Marilyn's side, resting a hand on her shoulder. You did it, she whispered. But Marilyn didn't answer. She was still watching the door swing shut, not because she expected him to come back, but because it had finally, fully closed. The news cycle spun hard and fast, for 3 days, then it moved on. A pop star announced her pregnancy. A political scandal cracked open in the next state. And just like that, the story of the lottery winner sued by his own mother faded to the second scroll, then the third, then gone. Tyler gave no interview. His publicist issued a brief statement, some generic lines about privacy, learning, and moving forward. He canceled 3 brand deals, 1 pulled out on their own. A podcast he'd recorded weeks earlier was quietly shelved. Candace made her announcement with more flair. A pale pink carousel of filtered images on Instagram. A photo of her alone in Greece. A caption that read, "Sometimes self-love means saying goodbye to the chaos, even when it hurts." There was no mention of Tyler, but everyone knew. He unfollowed her the next day. She didn't follow back. Marilyn didn't post anything. She didn't need to. Instead, she filed the judgment away in a simple manila folder. No frame, no plaque, no announcement. It sat quietly in the drawer beside her passport, her birth certificate, and the faded copy of her marriage license. She had what she came for, and she knew what to do with it. 2 weeks after the ruling, she met with the director of a local community college. They sat across from each other in a sun-warmed office filled with mismatched furniture and the smell of dry erase markers. She handed them a check, a large one. "I'd like it to go toward scholarships," she said, "for first-generation students. Anyone who's trying to keep going when they're tired and broke and still showing up." The director blinked back tears. "May I ask who the fund is named after?" Marilyn thought for a long moment, then said simply, "No. Just make sure they use it." The next day, Jordan called. He congratulated her again, gently this time, like he knew she wasn't in the mood for celebration. Then he pitched the idea. "I have contacts at a publishing house," he said. "They're interested in a memoir. Motherhood, resilience, justice. You wouldn't have to write it all yourself? There'd be a ghostwriter?" Marilyn smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "I appreciate that," she said. "But I think I've told that story as far as I need it to go." "Fair enough," Jordan replied, warm. "Then let me buy you lunch sometime." "Not as your lawyer. Just as someone who admires the hell out of you," she chuckled. "Lunch, I'll consider." That evening, Nancy arrived just after sunset. She didn't knock, just let herself in like she had for 20 years, carrying a grocery store cake with cheap roses piped in sugar and a bottle of red wine under her arm. "I figured you wouldn't throw a party," Nancy said, kicking off her shoes. "So I brought one you can't return." Marilyn raised an eyebrow. "Is that boxed wine?" "It's half off boxed wine. Show some respect." They sat at the kitchen table, just the two of them, just like old times. They didn't toast to victory. They didn't name names. Nancy poured the wine into two mismatched mugs and raised hers in the air. "To dignity," she said, "and not setting the world on fire, even when you could have." Marilyn clinked her mug gently against hers. "To knowing where the matches are, and choosing not to strike them." They drank in silence for a while. The cake stayed untouched. Outside, the wind picked up, stirring the trees just beyond the porch. Autumn was deeper now, not cold yet, but close. The kind of night that made you think of new beginnings, not fresh wounds. Marilyn glanced at the watch on her wrist, still ticking, still hers. Marilyn started with the soil. She borrowed a spade from Nancy, who offered to help, but Marilyn declined. This was something she needed to do alone. The backyard hadn't been touched in years, not really. Just a patch of overgrown ivy, dry grass, and memory. She spent days clearing it out, pulling weeds, turning earth, letting the ache in her knees and wrists remind her she was still here, still able, still hers. By the end of the week, a small garden had taken shape. Tomatoes, basil, peppers, lavender lining the fence. Nothing fancy, nothing curated for social media. Just life, coaxed gently from the ground, because she could, and because no one could take it from her. She hung a simple wind chime near the back gate. When the breeze caught it, it made no grand song, just a soft silver note that carried quietly into the kitchen window. That was enough. Mornings came with tea now, not courtroom. In the afternoons, she walked down to the East Side Literacy Center, a little place tucked between a laundromat and a bail bonds office. She signed up as a volunteer, 1 day a week at first, then 2. Her students were all ages, some shy, some eager, some proud and terrified at once. She didn't try to be anyone's savior, just a hand on the page, a voice reminding them that starting late still counts. "You've got time," she told them. "If you got breath, you've got time." The director gave her a lanyard with her name on it. She tucked it into her purse each time she left, but she kept it. At home, the desk drawer where she stored the legal files now held only 3 things: the judgment envelope, the scholarship receipts, and the sealed letter from Tyler. He'd mailed it weeks after the verdict. No return address, just his handwriting on the front, unfamiliar now in its restraint. She hadn't opened it. She didn't know if she ever would. Some wounds don't want answers. They just want air. One afternoon, she found an envelope in the mailbox with a government seal. Not ominous, but curious. It was from the state lottery office. Inside, a single note. "Miss Royce, I watched this unfold from the wrong distance. You had every reason to burn the whole house down, but you didn't. What you did instead meant more than press releases ever could. Thank you for your grace. Brent K. Commission Office." She folded it once, then tucked it into her cookbook as a bookmark. She didn't need it displayed, but she wanted it remembered. People reached out occasionally, quiet messages from strangers, emails signed "From a Mother Who Understands." a father from Michigan, a woman in Arizona, some with stories of betrayal, some with stories of silence, some with stories that were still waiting for their ending. Marilyn answered only a few, the ones that felt like they needed it most, but she read them all. Every word, every ache, folded into digital paper. Late one Sunday, with the sky melting into that bruised purple only September gives, she sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and the last bit of warmth brushing against her cheeks. The garden swayed gently in the breeze. Nancy's laugh echoed faintly from next door. The chimes whispered. The sun tucked itself beneath the rooftops, and for the first time in a long time, her body didn't feel braced. It felt rested, not healed. That would take longer, but still, she breathed in, she breathed out, and when the light caught the rim of her coffee mug just right, she looked out past the garden, past the gate, past all of it, and let herself feel it. Not victory, not vengeance, just the quiet power of knowing she'd done what needed to be done, not for applause, not for legacy, but so she could sit exactly where she was now, with peace in her chest, the earth beneath her feet, and no more waiting in her bones. He saw the lawyer, but he finally saw the woman too.